My guy Spence has a trade that we're pretty sure the math works out on. He'll tell you what it is. We'll talk about it coming up next on Courtside with the Cavs on SI. What's going on, Cavs fans? Thanks for stopping by on the latest edition of Courtside with the Cavs on SI. Spencer German, Spencer Davies with you. We already have Spence a hell no in the comment section. The person is anticipating that your trade is going to suck. Teresa Reeves.
I don't know. That might be the second part of the title that she's going against.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That's very fair. I thought this was like a impromptu, just assuming that this trade sucks and she wants nothing to do with it. So we'll find out what Spence's potential trade scenario is here momentarily. I was going to ask though, Spence, how did you consume the Knicks-Pacers game last night? Because, man, that was an all-timer. I love that Halliburton hit the choking celebration in honor of Reggie Miller. It would have only been made better if that was actually a 3 instead of a 2. But the fact that he finished the job was awesome. I know Kobe Altman joked about like this being a hard series or the rest of the playoffs are going to be hard to watch. I think Cavs fans feel sort of similarly. But if you're trying to find any rooting interest in this series, like that was a hell of a way to start that series off.
My God, man. I mean, the 2K roll, too. The way it happened, the bounce off back
Yeah.
iron up and through the net. You could just feel that arena just deflate as soon as it happened. I feel like I was watching Game 2 of the Cavs-Pacers in Cleveland. I felt like I was watching Game 5 of the Pacers versus the Bucks, the way that game finished. It's just incredible how Indiana has just found a way to win these games down double digits in fourth quarters. At some point, you have to look at the team that's doing it more than the teams that are losing these leads, because this just seems like team of destiny type of stuff. So
It does.
I can put myself right where I was watching it last night. I was actually with Ethan Sands at Cleveland.com and my buddy Spencer Heffernan over at FanDuel. We were watching it and just absolutely in awe. Aaron Nesmith, no one really talking about him going 8 of 9 from deep to help that happen in the first place. Obi Toppin was brilliant. And then, of course, Tyrese Halliburton doing the big thing at the end there with the shot that sent it into overtime. Then from there, just unbelievable job by the Pacers. And there's a reason that they're in that position. And I don't know, man. There's one of those things just kind of makes you think twice about maybe how harsh we were on the Cavs, because it happened to another team. It's the third time it's happened in the postseason. And maybe you just have to take a step back and have a little bit of credence to what Kobe was talking about last week.
They are quite literally like the cockroach of the NBA right now. Like, they just don't die. No matter what you do to them, they find a way to live. And they're still living in these playoffs. They now have a lead on the Knicks in that series. I mean, that game, it was phenomenal. Every moment of that game felt phenomenal. Them pulling off another comeback, like just some of the shots that were made, like some epic moments, like in the guard. Like, that is the iconic stuff that you dream of when you talk about this sport and you think about some of the things that we grew up watching with LeBron, just like things that stand out and you'll remember forever. That was cool. And you're right. Like, on some level, it makes you think how good the Pacers really are. I thought Charles Barkley made a really good point during, I think, had the halftime show, where he said, if the Knicks think that they can run with Indiana for the entire game the way that they play, then they're mistaken, because their bench isn't as deep as Indiana's. And that's the key thing here is like, yes, Jalen Brunson and company are all conditioned to play 30 or 40 minutes a game, but can they do that in a 7-game series against this Pacers team that is also conditioned to just like run up and down the floor? On makes, they run up the floor. On misses, they run up the floor. Like, everything they do is just fast. And I think he's got to go, like, because they're so deep, like, everyone knows how to do it. I think it's a really good point that, like, and they're already behind the 8 ball because they're down in the series, but like, can they, for a 7-game series, keep up that pace with the Pacers? They almost won last night, but can they do that for 7 games? I'd probably side with the Pacers in that regard, because I do think that their style is just such a problem for teams, even ones like the Knicks, who maybe have played a lot of minutes, but also don't necessarily have the bench to keep pace with them. So I think that's kind of an interesting element of this series in general.
Too bad the Knicks weren't mentally tough enough or physically tough enough, huh?
Yes.
Had to throw that
there
in
we
there.
go.
Had to
You
throw
had
that
to
in
do
there.
it.
Come on, let's bring up all the tropes, right?
You had to do it. You had to do it.
No,
Well,
but here's the thing. I did chime in on that conversation because I saw a couple of people on Twitter. I think it was Lima and Ziggy, who I love following as a part of the Cavs Twitterverse and seeing things go on. And it's just funny because, like, Zig was the one that made that joke, and then Lima chimed in. And he's like, okay, but what do you think about Max Strus and a number of guys actually saying stuff about the toughness and the mental toughness? And I was like, look, this is a two things can be true at the same time scenario. Yes, you have the mental and physical toughness part that you have to get better at. You can't blow those leads. I understand that. But you also have to contextually look at what the Pacers, as I mentioned earlier, have done to two other teams, including yours, that was just unprecedented. The record or whatever was like in the 1,140s. And like these games that just have ridiculous endings to them. And the Pacers have won 3 of them just in the past month. So there is something there for that. And there's also something for the physical and mental toughness. So it's a little bit of both. It's not just all or nothing.
I like that thought process, and I do agree. Like that's the stuff when we talked about mental toughness and physical toughness, which, by the way, those are things that Kenny Atkinson brought up himself. So it is fair game to talk about them. But like I think that's the part of it that can be developed, right? We talked about can it be learned or not. That mental part of it, where it's like, okay, in that situation, if you could do it all over again, how do you close it out? How do you navigate that situation so it ends differently? The Pacers have some experience with this now. They've done it 3 different times. How do you kind of gain that experience, and how do you learn from the experiences that you've had? So we'll see if the Cavs are better in those types of situations next year. But certainly speaks. I think that game 1 of this series certainly speaks to rather just how great that Pacers team is. And like you said, it does feel very much like Team of Destiny stuff. Spence, the task at hand, or the topic at hand here that we really wanted to lead off the show with, though, centers around the thing everybody wants to know, which is, okay, the Cavs have some tough decisions to make. We're going to get into retaining some of their own guys here in a little bit. But the big thing everyone wants to know is, like, are they going to break up the core 4? Are they going to make a trade? And the fun thing to do is pull out the NBA trade machine on ESPN and, you know, try some concoction of players and picks and salary cap matching to make a deal go through. And you hit that submit button and it goes to the next page and it says, this trade is good. And everyone just throws it out on social media and they're like, hey, look, I just made the Cavs better, without understanding the true nuances of the salary cap and all these different things. And I want to be very, very clear. I consider myself very much a novice when it comes to the NBA salary cap. I'm an NFL guy. I could talk about the NFL salary cap as long as the day is as the day is long. Like I'm good on that front. But the NBA always confuses me in certain elements. There's basic stuff I know, but there's other stuff I don't. I admit that, Spence. I think you definitely know more than me because I ask you a lot of questions sometimes, and sometimes you have an answer and sometimes you don't. But I also think that you don't necessarily venture into that all the time because you don't want to say things that are wrong. So I think we're both similar in that way. But you did propose a trade that I think the math works on as I went and sort of played with it in the trade machine. And I understand, like, I just said not to do that, and then I'm also doing it. But we just want to make sure for the sake of the conversation that it made some sense. And I think this one makes some sense. And I actually think this is a trade, because we talked about it before we obviously recorded here. I think it's a trade that makes the Cavs at least generally like the same, but it changes out some of the, like, a key piece in part that I think adds a dynamic to this team that's missing as we talk about the toughness factor and all that. And I think fans are going to like this, but if Teresa's comment was about not liking your trade before you even pitched it, maybe that's a trend of how this thing's going to go and this conversation is going to go. But I think this is a trade that people can get behind. I'll let you propose it, and then we can talk through it a little bit.
Well, I was just looking through Spot Rack. It's probably my favorite contractual website that you can see kind of the sheet and the full rosters and whatnot. There is a tiny snafu with my idea. We don't know yet. We know reportedly, but we don't know yet whether or not Bobby Portis is going to opt in to his player option or if he's going to opt out and be a free agent. In that case, sign and trade with Milwaukee, Bobby Portis. You look at Jarrett Allen as potentially being that other piece going back to Milwaukee. And then one more player, possibly an AJ Green, maybe a Pat Connaughton. He also has a player option. So I was just thinking a 2-for-1 for Jarrett Allen, maybe some draft capital coming from Milwaukee. And that was my initial thought, because the first thing I thought of, okay, if you're going to trade Jarrett Allen, and this is a big if because they still seem to believe in him. I rewatched Kobe Altman's press conference from this past Monday, and I know that people think that he omitted his words from Jarrett Allen when talking about this core, but when he was asked about him later in the press conference, he was talking about how essential he was to a 64-win first seed team and doubled down on that and talked about how Jarrett's an easy target, all that good stuff. So this isn't even like to say, all right, they're going to definitely trade Jarrett Allen. But if they were going to, you have to get someone back that rebounds. You have to get someone back that can be a starter, and you would have to get a rotational piece back. So at least 2 players being able to match those salaries. And also with JA, his salary gets bumped next year. So that's also another big piece of this. Like, not this coming year, but the year after that, the salary bumps. So that's the other way to think about this, especially when filling out a roster. That was the first name that kind of came to mind as I was digging through some of these teams. I did see Nick Wilson, your buddy over at 92.3, my buddy as well, looking at Isaac Okoro for Jonas Valanciunas deal. Again, I understand the need for the backup center and also how Isaac Okoro and guys like Dwayne Wade are probably going to be, kind of floated out there on the margins, as the word that Kobe uses a lot. But we have to be careful because we don't know who's signing. We don't know what trades are going to happen. So the salary caps right now and the money situations with a lot of these teams might not even be what they look like when the calendar year gets started, because a lot of moves can happen. Giannis can get traded. There's all these sorts of intricacies that can happen that might not even make what we say today possible in a month.
Right. No, listen, all these things are important context to like this even potentially being something that happens. I also think too, like, you talk about him opting in on the player option, like some of that might revolve around like what happens to Giannis, right? And them also being willing to trade Bobby Portis might revolve around what happens with Giannis. If Giannis is leaving, then maybe the Bucks are going into like a rebuild mode, and they're like, all right, let's try to trade some assets here. Somebody like Jarrett Allen could be a nice piece to sort of start building around. He's still in his mid-20s, chance to sort of be a foundational piece, stay competitive, but he's not, it creates an interesting sort of setup there. So I'd be curious about that. I liked this trade as well. We had a couple. I know we had somebody in the comments say they liked it. Somebody also said they didn't like it. So we have a 50-50 split right now in the comments in terms of how people feel about the trade. But yeah, like I think Bobby Portis being sort of the central piece you're getting back in this potential deal. And you mentioned a couple different names. I know like Gary Trent, I think was somebody you mentioned initially. He has like $2 million. He's an unrestricted free agent, so that one doesn't necessarily work as well. But Connaughton, as you said, has like he's due like $9 million next year, and that's something where he also has a player option, I believe, too, so he could opt in, and then you have the same sort of thing. Like the money, I think, does match. It lines up with what the NBA restrictions are, based on what I understand about it. But yes, the option part of this is the key, because, like you said, if Bobby Portis doesn't opt in, and then it's a sign and trade situation, well, that's one of those things that hard caps the Cavaliers right now. Is if they do a deal that involves a sign and trade, they get hard capped at whatever their salary cap is from that point moving forward. So there's a lot of obviously moving parts and pieces here, but I thought this was kind of a fun idea and a fun trade that you sort of just drummed up, because again, if you're looking to change out some pieces and parts, and we both agree, I think Jarrett is the one that makes the most sense to potentially move, like getting somebody like Bobby Portis, who at the age he'll be 30 next year. He has that playoff pedigree. Like he's won a championship before. We've seen him on that stage do some things that I think people would constitute as that mentally tough or physically tough part of the game that you need at this time of year. And it's about getting like a different body, a different philosophy, a different player in there next to Evan Mobley. He can play that power forward spot. Mobley can play more center. I think it would match pretty well. So I thought this was a pretty good idea. I feel like there will probably be some pushback from some people, though, who feel like maybe this isn't the caliber of player that you would want getting back for Jarrett Allen. But I think Bobby Portis is a pretty damn good player myself.
Well, I would take Bobby Portis being a sixth man of the year candidate pretty much the last 3 years is definitely someone that's of that ilk, that is starter caliber, even though he comes off the bench. It's almost like the DeAndre Hunter thing, right? Like DeAndre Hunter coming off the bench this year, but he's obviously a starter level player and somebody who is still on the ascent. And speaking of DeAndre Hunter in the lineup like that, he could play the three you could think of.
Yeah, which I love. I love that idea for him.
And you would be more looking at a 5-out type of situation there. And as I mentioned, Bobby Portis is a hell of a rebounder. And that's something you would have to replace if you traded Jarrett Allen, because Jarrett is one of the best in the business at getting on the glass. No matter what happened the last 2 games of the playoffs, he's still somebody that grabs boards like crazy. And, it also has to do with how much Kenny was switching him and stuff like that as well. So these are very, very hypothetical as we're talking about. But in terms of that ilk, if you want to get nastier, Bobby Portis fits that bill. I think Jonas Valanciunas, as I mentioned earlier with Nick's idea, fits that bill. The Steven Adams types, those fit that bill. So, yeah, it's all stuff that we can talk about now on May 22nd, but it's at the end of the day, we have to wait for dominoes to fall, I think also. And some of those dominoes are on the Cavs, and I think that's a good segue into what needs to happen first for Cleveland to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, we'll get into that here in just a second. But I agree with you on all fronts with Bobby Portis being that guy that has that playoff physicality that you're looking for, different mentality to his game. Listen, he shot 46% from the floor last year. He's a 47% from the floor shooter just in general. He can knock down some threes at a decent rate, like 36, 37% for his career. And his defensive rating is better than what the average is. And that rebounding piece, I think, is the biggest thing. Because like you said, if you're losing Jarrett Allen, you have to have somebody who steps in. And yes, Evan maybe assumes a little bit of a bigger role if he's going to become your primary 5, but can help you space the floor. But you still need to sort of supplement somebody who can account for some of that rebounding that you miss with Jarrett. So I love that idea and what he brings to the table from that standpoint as well. And it's just another reason why I think this potential deal would make sense for Cleveland. So, again, I'm on board with something like this. A lot that still has to happen, as we know. But to me, like if we're talking about starting points, if we're talking about trades that could come to fruition, this one makes some sense to me. And it just comes down to now how everything kind of shakes out from here. And I also like the Valanciunas idea. But like you said, Spence, we do have the Cavs have some bigger dominoes that have to sort of fall first, revolving around their own players and potentially retaining them. Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill at the forefront of this list. Those two guys are guys that it sounds like they want to keep. But they're going to come with getting into that second apron and Dan Gilbert having to be willing to pay a massive, massive tax bill. And so there's some things that you kind of have to do. There's also the factors of if you're keeping certain, like there's just a lot that comes into play financially that you have to think about here as you talk through these things. And I thought that the comments from Kobe Altman, which we hit on in the last episode, where he discussed like guys even further down the roster and how development is such an important part of what they want to do, play a role in maybe where their head's at with this. He did use the term hopeful in terms of Ty Jerome. And it sounds like they want to hopefully keep both him and Sam Merrill, but it's going to come down to like the dollars and cents of it all. Where do you think things kind of stand on that front, and how do they sort of fit into the picture from your perspective?
Well, I think Ty's relationship with the organization is really important. Like Donovan is one of his best friends. He's got a great relationship with Kobe. Obviously, DeAndre Hunter, having played in college. And I'm sure the bonds that he built over the last 2 years, let's not forget, he was in this locker room the year before. He just didn't play. So he did build a lot of bonds with these guys. Max Strus, all of that. I think that he's going to command a pretty decent salary. I don't care what happened in the playoffs there in the second round. Like, he had a heck of a year. He can shoot the heck out of the basketball. He can organize the floor. His one shortcoming is the defensive end of the floor, and that's keeping up with a lot of the faster guys. So that's where you have to think, all right, how much money are we willing to pay? And just looking around, I think the teams that can pay him the most amount of money, I don't know, would really suit what he wants. He probably wants a winning environment. And what better than Cleveland, right, for that? And you look at the fact that the Cavs have his early bird rights. They can sign for 175% of the salary cap and can make the most money with the Cavs. So that's the first thing that we have to talk about. Second thing is if he's also looking for a change of pace, possibly that who can offer the mid-level exception. And that was what Chris Fedor wrote on Cleveland.com today. He was talking about the full mid-level exception teams that would be appealing based on the system, playing style, opportunity, and contention status. He mentioned 3 teams, the Spurs, the Mavericks, and the Warriors. That was according to Chris Fedor at Cleveland.com. And he said to keep an eye on all 3 of those if it was not to work out here in Cleveland. Denver was another one, but they will probably be a first apron team. So you put those 4 into perspective. You look at, depending on how much they trust what they have in-house too. But based on Kobe's comments, it sounds to me like Craig Porter Jr. would be first in line to be the backup point guard. It sounds to me like Jalen Tyson would be a part of this rotation next year, just based on the developmental conversations. And that's where we can kind of move towards the Sam Merrill conversation. Fedor reported that $6 to $8 million is what they believe that Sam will command in free agency. So are they willing to pay $6 to $8 million for somebody that's, the 8th man, the 9th man? These are conversations you need to have, especially when you're entering that second apron, when all of these contracts and max extensions start coming into play, Evan Mobley included, and you have Darius Garland, you have Donovan Mitchell. It's not easy. DeAndre Hunter is not cheap to have on this roster too. Let's not forget about that. So Hunter and Allen making 20 plus, 24 plus, whatever it is. So that's where it gets a little bit more difficult to retain guys like that. But that's also why you have the developmental system that you have to make sure that while you're addressing and keeping and retaining some of your best players, you also are not so shallow of a roster that you don't have depth.
Yeah, I think that's well said in terms of how they have to kind of navigate this thing and be careful, because once you get to that second apron, you are very limited in what you're obviously able to do. And how they handle those guys in particular is going to be interesting. I think there's probably some level, Spence, of like my read on it right now is that this is just a guess. I'm guessing they would try to keep at least one of those guys. Like, they'll make it work. Dan Gilbert will write the check. They'll sort of have him stick around. But I kind of feel like they're going to lose one, and that's where that developmental piece is going to come into play. And it's going to be up to, like you said, like a Craig Porter Jr. or a Jalen Tyson, who they feel pretty highly, they think pretty highly of being a first-round pick last year, to sort of fill in those gaps and take on a different role and be more prominent in the rotation next year. And I can live with that. Like there is a level of whether it's the NBA or elsewhere, like there is a level of development that has to happen across a roster to get, to kind of get yourself over that hump. So it feels like they'll keep one. I don't know which at this point. I know they want to keep both, but it feels like they'll keep at least one. And then we'll have to see where the chips kind of fall from there. But yes, like there's going to be interest from some of these other teams, obviously, in somebody like Ty, even after the disastrous second round he had where he was really a non-factor. Sounds like the Cavs still value him pretty highly. And it's going to kind of be interesting to see like what his value is and how much that series hurt or didn't hurt him, because I think he was in line for a pretty big payday before that series, and maybe that changes. Now, like the teams that I think the 4 teams that have like total cap space and can like truly pursue him, but that also maybe don't make a ton of sense, like fit wise, are Detroit, Memphis, and Chicago. Brooklyn is the one that maybe makes the most sense and could go after him. But it's also one of those things where, like, is Brooklyn really going to put their money in order right now to go chase Ty Jerome? Maybe they want Giannis, and then if they get Giannis, that puts them in a position where they think differently and they do want to get a prioritized backup point guard. I don't know. But they don't really seem ready for that necessarily. So I think those teams that you bring up are the ones to really watch. Dallas, Golden State, San Antonio, maybe Denver, as I know Chris also mentioned, but they might be a first apron team. I don't know, like the Ty Jerome thing sort of feels like it's like all roads just lead back to Cleveland because the relationships he's built here, the fact that he's in a system that really maximizes him just playing freely and being himself, and he really thrived here with Kenny Atkinson. So it feels like all roads maybe lead to him being back in Cleveland. But then what does that mean for Sam Merrill, I think remains to be seen, because I don't know that they bring back both. Maybe they will, and Dan Gilbert will just write the check, like I said. But I feel like they are going to, because of Kobe's comments, I think they're leaving the door open for somebody that was even further in the rotation this past year to have a bigger role next year. And it's going to come from one of those two guys probably not being here.
Agreed with that. And going on Yossi Goslin's podcast just a few days ago, his thought, and he's a capologist. He's someone that studies the sheets and follows along with the league. Great guy. We're going to have him on the pod at some point here. But his inkling was that neither come back. So take that with a grain of salt. Yeah.
I mean, listen, as somebody who knows the Cap, I think that's, some good perspective when you're sort of navigating what they can and can't do, how they have to think about the future of this team. I mean, and here's the other thing too, Spence, like the Cavs do have to think smartly about this. Like it'd be one thing if they were playing in the NBA Finals. I mean, I know it wouldn't be right now, but if they were playing for the NBA Finals right now or still had a chance to win it, and they were investing in this team like drunken sailors and just like paying everybody, right? Like that's what the Celtics did last year. They won. There was an ownership change coming, and that owner was like, I'll just pay everybody and then pass the baton to somebody else to deal with the aftermath of it all. And so I on some level, like if that was what was happening right now and the Cavs are still in the playoffs, I get like paying everybody. But the fact of the matter is, like, this is a team that was disposed of in the second round yet again in 5 games, coming up very short of the ultimate goal that they have. And does it make sense to continue paying for all these guys and keep things status quo completely and just like invest this much money in a team that right now hasn't proven they can get over that hump? Like, I think there's some thought process that needs to be given there, because otherwise you set yourself back for the future. Like if they go another year where Kobe Altman's trying to sell you on, hey, Evan Mobley's going to develop, other guys are going to develop, and then you still fall short in the second round. And the big question I had was, at what point is development not an excuse anymore? Like, at what point do you have to make a change? If that comes next year and you don't have the flexibility to make any changes, well, now you're in a different situation entirely. And it's like, well, how do you get this team better around Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley, who you think are going to be 2 important pieces to you achieving that goal? So Kobe Altman has to be smart with how he manages these things. It's an interesting and a precarious situation to be in, because I do think the Cavs are a good team, but are they so good that they should be spending in the second apron and have these record-setting salary numbers? I'm not so sure.
Well, in rewatching that press conference, Kobe clearly stated that with that 64-win season, that recreated their expectation. Like, oh, this should be a finals team. And you know what also does that? Going out and acquiring Donovan Mitchell before Darius Garland and Evan Mobley are fully developed. So now you find yourself in that middle area of like, all right, we're waiting for these guys to come along. And Evan came along. DG came along. In the playoffs, some bad luck. Like, we can be honest with ourselves. There was some bad luck there. I know everyone wants to yell and scream and you know what I'm saying? Like, but there was some bad luck involved there. Can you keep going back to that every year? No. But Evan Mobley does have to get used to that usage. He only took 13 shots a game this season. He only took somewhere around 11 or 12 in the playoffs. Darius Garland was walking around on one leg and giving you his all in that playoff series. Can you really say that that's who that guy is? I don't know if you can. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone will tell me I told you so 2-3 years down the line, and Darius Garland fades off to the sunset. I just don't believe he's that type of player. I think that there is room for him to get stronger. I think there is room for him to continue getting better on the defensive end. Evan Mobley, same thing. I think there's plenty of room for him to get better. He's 23 years old, for God's sake. And that, I feel like, is true. Like, they are going to go as Evan goes, and Evan's been only at this for 4 years. So 4 or 5 years, and that is remarkable to me that they're already here. Maybe they have overachieved to an extent, and maybe that's why our expectations are so high of them. It's unfair, but it just kind of comes with the territory. But for them to be on that path and Donovan to be just getting to his prime, that's why the conversations become difficult. And even if you look at Jarrett's 27. Like, these are still, I'm not saying Jarrett's like young by any means, but for like NBA age to have the amount of experience he does and have his age be 27, it's pretty impressive. And no wonder they've had such patience with this group, because there has been incremental process and incremental progress, and they've taken baby steps. They just haven't taken that giant leap forward. And sometimes that's circumstantial.
I mean, listen, there is something to be said for, as we're watching the rest of these NBA playoffs unfold, the 4 teams that are left are extremely healthy right now, right? Like, I don't think any of them have any serious injuries to players that are important to what they do. That's going to be the case every single year, man. Like we know that every year, the teams that are the most healthy, the teams that get to this point and are able to, have that health factor being what it is, are the teams that have the best chance to go far in this tournament and potentially win it. So, yes, there is a factor of that's always going to be in play. The Cavaliers have had some really bad, frankly, injury luck the last couple of years. I think Spence might be frozen here. And they have to sort of reconcile with that. And that's why, I can wrap my head around the idea that being patient makes some sense. And on some level, running it back makes some sense because you're trying to hope that luck goes in your favor and things bounce a little bit differently for you with the guys that you already kind of have in place. So that's when Kobe says that, I don't think and I think Spence is back now. We're good. I was just saying, man, the injury part of this and the fact that the 4 teams left in the playoffs are all the healthiest teams right now. That's always going to be a factor. And that's why, I can't understand Kobe saying, hey, we got to run it back and try again on some level because, hey, next year things bounce differently. Guys don't get hurt. Maybe you're the team ascending to the top. So I get that. But I do think you have to strike that balance between just keeping things the same because you believe in them and understanding okay, we do need a different element to our team to get over that hump. And I think the Cavs are at that crossroads right now. Personally, I think that. But I understand where maybe they feel differently from an organization standpoint. But that's the battle they have to sort through this offseason. That's exactly what we're talking about. Potential trades. Can they retain all the same guys from last year? Can they pay all these guys and be a second apron team? Those are the big conversations that need to be had.
If you're not keeping an open year, then you're doing a disservice to your team. That's all it is. It isn't saying blow it up, get rid of everyone.
Right.
But you have to think about these things just because the results are the results. And you can't handle them with kid gloves anymore. They are not at that point of their ascension to where you have to coddle them. You can be critical for sure. I think that there is an element and difference of levels of criticism. And I think that a lot of people go way over the line, thinking everything's got to change, but you do have to at least be open-minded. And that goes back to the example we were talking about in the parking lot this past week was Denver made a move to go get an Aaron Gordon.
Yeah.
Boston made a move to trade away Marcus Smart and end up having Derek White and Drew Holiday on that roster and Kristaps Porzingis. OKC, Alex Caruso has been their most impactful defensive player on the team. Isaiah Hartenstein's been critical to them. So these are moves that were made while still keeping a core intact. And I think that you just have to realize that going forward as a decision maker.
It's about striking that balance. I tend to be a guy, Spence, who prides myself on the old saying of life is everything's a balance in life. And I think that's what the Cavs are kind of facing here. There's the balance between which are your core guys, who can you maybe move on from, how do you turn this into a championship contender while also staying patient with certain players. It's all puzzle that they have to figure out. But you're right. If I have to hear whether it's Kobe or whether it's anybody else, if I have to hear anybody else sell me on the idea that hey, be patient. Look at the Celtics. Look at the Thunder. Look at the Nuggets. Look at this team. Look at that team. I'm going to bash my head into a wall because, like you said, all of those teams, as we have pointed out, made changes to get them over that hump and get them closer to a championship. The Cavs haven't done that yet. And so that's why I think this offseason is so pivotal. I want to throw up a couple, as we talked about our trade scenario that you pitched, and I say we, I helped you formulate it, but it really was just your idea that you birthed. As we talked about our Bobby Portis idea, some other people threw some ideas in the comments. First of all, Mr. Z says, I do the Jonas deal. Great vet, big body, can space the floor. I agree. I like that as a thought process from our friend Nick Wilson. Evan, Jarrett are redundant. The better Evan becomes, the less you need Jarrett. I think that's very true. Let's get to here's the first scenario. Jared Teal throws out Garland for DeRozan and Valanciunas. I have a reason why I don't like this trade.
My God.
I'll let you go first, but I have a reason why I don't like this trade.
I have a reason too. Is
you're like, I have 20 reasons.
all respect to DeMar DeRozan. He's one of my favorite players, honestly, ever of the new era. When I started really digging into like the 2010s and even like watching his career at USC. He's a very old school player. You get to that mid range, really has a lot of heart, a lot of clutch shots. But guys, I mean, DeRozan's on the back nine of his career. Darius Garland,
that's it for me.
25. And where has DeMar DeRozan gotten in his career in the playoffs, guys? Can we think about that? There's a reason they call the play-in tournament the DeRozan Invitational online. Like, come on, man. Like,
there's a reason why when LeBron used to meet them every year, they started calling it LeBronto every year.
all due respect. What are you thinking on that? There is no chance. And I do like JV. Like JV, great center to have in that situation as a bring back for someone like Jarrett, or I know the salaries don't match on that or whatever like that, but someone who gets you rebounds, has a great jump hook, and has even increased his game to the outside and has no problem being bashful
for a reason.
But good God, what kind of deal is that? Are you insane?
You alluded to it. The reason I don't like that is because that truly shortens the window for the Cavs. Like, that's a deal that, like, you take it's not, I want to be clear, it's not quite the level of like Luka for Anthony Davis, but the reason everyone was critical of that trade was like, okay, they think that having Anthony Davis is going to help them defensively, and that's going to be a thing that helps them get over the hump like in the now, but it also shortened your window, because with Luka, you'd be competitive for like another decade. With Anthony Davis, you're talking like 3-4 years. And so I think that's how I view this trade, is like, if you get DeMar DeRozan at 35, I get it. I think he's a tremendous player. He killed the Cavs this year for what it's worth, but I don't know that I like that, because it shortens the window of opportunity that you have here. That window that obviously we know Kobe talked about so much. Here's another one for you.
By that deal.
Here's another one for you, and this one actually did come up somewhere else online, and we talked about it a little bit. Jarrett Allen for Rui Hachimura and Dalton Connect.
No.
Lakers need a center. I think, okay, so on the surface, I kind of liked this deal because it gives needs for both teams. But I know you have a reason. I keep saying you have like one reason, but I'm sure you have multiple. You have a reason why you don't like that one specifically. And I as I thought about it more the last couple of days, I think I subscribe more to like what you're saying here in terms of what you're getting back in return.
You're selling way low on an all-star caliber center who's 27. And Rui Hachimura, again, all due respect, I know he's a lottery pick. He's a good player that can really shoot it from beyond the arc, 40% plus the last 2 seasons. But guys, like, you don't trade away a 20 and 12 guy for somebody who just found a role in LA, and also someone who is unproven when Dalton Connect. I know that we're enamored by potential. I love potential as somebody that loves player development. But what has Dalton Connect proved at the NBA level at this point? That's my question.
Yeah, nothing yet.
So you're, I mean,
and that's
again, grasping at straws for that.
So
Yeah.
Well, so here's the thing. Like, when I first saw this trade, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of intrigued by that, because I think it accomplishes things the Cavs need. The Cavs need somebody like Rui who can space the floor, shoot threes, can play the full. Like, I think he addresses some of the things you're looking for. And so I was intrigued by that, and I was intrigued by Connect. Maybe I had a little bit too much Kobe Altman on the brain, because this idea of potential, right? Like, hey, we want to develop a guy like Dalton Connect. I think there's something to be said for that. And so on the surface, I was like, I like this. But in the last couple of days in thinking about it, you're right. And that this deal would feel like you're selling low on Jarrett Allen. And the Cavs are just never going to do that. But I also think, too, on the Connect piece of this and what you just said about, like, he's proven nothing in the NBA. Yes, I think the Cavs banking on potential for certain guys on the roster already makes some sense. But the other thing is, if you're changing out some pieces and parts, if you are making a big trade like that to break up the core four, you need to be getting guys back who are going to contribute to a championship caliber team and get you over that hump. And so I don't know that, like, banking on a guy who's still very, like, in the very early stages of his development is the way to go. And for that reason, I'm probably more against this trade than for it, even though I initially felt like there was something there that was intriguing to me. If that makes sense.
I thought you were going to be like, for that reason, I'm out, like Shark Tank.
Yeah, just call me Mark Cuban over here. Yeah.
I mean, but guys, come on. Like, I know that we want to have fun with this stuff, but like, let's get some actual legitimate returns here. Like, I don't know why people are thinking that Jarrett Allen is so unthought of around the league. Like, people around the league love Jarrett Allen. Like, he's a good player.
Yeah.
And he sacrificed the most this past year by allowing Evan Mobley to get to that next step and to let Darius Garland have all those shot attempts. Like, Jarrett Allen on a nightly basis is a 2012 guy at minimum if you have him as a part of your focal point. Like, you look at what happened 2 Januaries ago with Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen. That guy was a top 3 center in the NBA at that point. Like, come on. Like behind Jokic and Embiid, obviously, at that point.
Yeah.
But it's baffling to me how little people think of Jarrett Allen around here because of the last thing they saw. And I mean, I get it from a playoff standpoint, but like even before those last 2 games, Jarrett was balling. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
And he did play 82 games. Like, he's durable. People are going to say he's not durable because he missed the playoffs last year. So this is going to come back to bite me, I'm sure. But like he proved this year.
91 games this year.
Right.
Yep.
He proved this year he can be durable. He proved he can give you, like, especially during the regular season, something that you need. Like, there are teams that are going to value him at that level. I agree. And yes, you can't sell low. Like, if that trade would kind of fall in the bucket of like, you just made a move to make a move. And I agree that you can't just do that. Now, if you're going to sell me Austin Reeves, sure. I'm not like
that's another conversation.
That's you had my attention, but now you have my curiosity trade. That's what that is right there. But I don't know if the Lakers want to trade Austin Reeves because I think they value his shooting too much. But that would be interesting for sure if that's a move that they would be willing to make. But that's a different conversation. The final thing I wanted to get to, Spence, before we wrap up here. There was some comments made by Dwayne Wade about Donovan Mitchell that I think were pretty interesting because as Donovan sits there and tells you, I know you guys are going to write us off and I know that I'm going to get judged. He says it all the time, right? He's going to continue to get judged by the fact that he hasn't made it out of the second round of the playoffs. And he recognizes that those things are just how it's life in the NBA. Dwayne Wade, I think, gave some credence to that with some comments he made on his own podcast, which I'm drawing a blank on what it's called now for some stupid reason. But regardless, I'll find it. He said, Wade said, quote, he's judged by what he does in the playoffs. What he does in the regular season, that's what he do. He's been doing it since he came into the league. Now it's where he gets judged. And he has to find a way. Like you said, obviously his leadership, he can't do it all, of course. Everything has to go right, but he has to find a way because he wants to be in that conversation with the greats. He puts in the work. He has the ability. He wants to be in the conversation. He has to find a way. And so I want to see him this summer, or I want to see what his summer is going to be like. I have some thoughts on this because we've talked a lot about Donovan being like the perfect star for Cleveland and how we don't necessarily put a ton at his feet from this series specifically and how the postseason ended. But I think Dwayne Wade is speaking, Spence, from like a bygone era of the NBA. Like, yes, it used to be about what is your star player doing in the most pivotal moments of games? And, is he getting them over that hump? Is he willing them to victory? That was the conversation so long in this town for LeBron James, and he couldn't get past it. For some people, he still hasn't gotten past it. Like that, people still judge him based off those types of moments and those types of things. And even when he'd make the right play, like kicking it to Kyle Korver in the corner, I remember, and he shot a 3, was wide open, one of the best 3-point shooters of all time, and he missed it. People are ready to pounce and say, well, he's not doing the right things in the key moments. But I just think like that is such a look at the 4 teams that are left. The 4 teams that are left, yes, they all have star players in their own right. And those guys are going to get judged at those key moments, but they also have teams that support them, like around them that support them to get them to the stage of the postseason. You can't just do it with one guy anymore. And you can't, to me, the blame goes beyond just putting it at the feet of the star and being like, well, it's up to you to get over that hump. No, in today's NBA, you need a team that is around that player. And Dwayne Wade should know that more than anybody because he was part of one of the biggest, the most notable big threes in NBA history when LeBron came there and they finally got over that hump together. I know he had won one before, but like LeBron finally got over that hump with him. So I get what Dwayne Wade is saying, and he is right. Like that is always going to be what we do with the sport is judge the stars based off of what they do this time of year and are they excelling in those moments. But Donovan excelled in those moments. It was just they couldn't finish the job, and I think that's the key thing that's missing here is like he can only do so much as one player, and in today's NBA, you need a whole team. It takes you can't just do it off of like the philosophy of like one star is enough and maybe a couple of key role players are enough. No, it takes a whole village. to get deeper in the playoffs this time of year. So yes, he's going to be judged based off that, but I can't sit there and be like, it's up to him to take this thing to the next level because he gave you everything he had, and it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, and you just look at the box score from game 2, and that just shows you all you need to know. The amount of shots he took, and he had to by necessity with all those guys out. But he get to the free throw line, had 21 free throw attempts and then 20-plus free throw attempts the next game that they won.
Yeah.
It's just not sustainable in this type of NBA with the pace, with the physicality, all of that stuff. I know that you had that back in the day and more guys could put their team on their back of the sun, but you want more balance in box scores. And this is the other part of this, too, that I disagree with Dwayne on is the Cavs are going to be at that championship caliber level when Evan Mobley gets to the championship caliber level. Evan Mobley is going to be the best player on the team. Donovan might be the leader. He might be the all-star, the guy that gets all the magazine interviews and the radio interviews and all that stuff. But Evan is the one that's going to be number one on this team.
Yeah.
And I think that is where this is difficult to evaluate. And this is where I don't envy Kobe Altman at all, because you have to take that into effect. And you do have to have a level of patience with this, because your star is going to be Evan. I know you have your superstar in Donovan, and he's out there, as I said several times, playing football out there against the Pacers and giving it his all and playing through a calf injury and an ankle injury, all that good stuff. But Evan's the one that's going to get you to that next level. And Donovan realized that. He took a step to the side, let Evan develop the way he did in the regular season, and then it just kind of got back to Donovan dominating the ball by necessity because of the injuries. And I think that ultimately threw the Cavs offense out of whack. Guys didn't know where their shots were coming from. They were also really tired when they had the ball, so they shot extremely poor. They were always kind of rushing. That, I think, has to change. That has to get back to their offensive identity in the postseason. And a lot of that has to be Donovan playmaking, or at least drawing attention and then dishing out and letting other guys take over and do a lot of the trusting that they had trust in him. It's got to reciprocate. And I think he does trust them guys.
What you just brought up, too, about how that series went and how Donovan took over and felt like he had to take over, maybe a little bit too much, maybe to a fault at times. I think that is that points to the biggest reason why what Dwayne Wade is saying is kind of debunked here, because he did do the thing that you expect stars to do in those moments, and it didn't
41% usage.
Right. It
Insane.
Didn't work. It did not work. So the idea that it's like, hey, Donovan, you got to figure this out. No, to me, as we've talked about for most of this episode, the figuring out that needs to happen is how this organization makes the team better around Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell. And actually, if Wade had directed those comments at Evan Mobley, I'd feel a lot different about it. I'd be like, yeah, you know what? He's right. Evan does have to take that next step. He does have to step up in those moments. But Donovan, he proved to you that the best player can step up in those moments, and it might just mean nothing, because in today's NBA, you can't just win that way anymore. And so I respect Dwayne Wade. He's obviously an all-time great, and he played in a different era. I'm not trying to say that you can't criticize Donovan Mitchell for anything, but I'm just saying, I think that trying to say it's up to him to get this team over the hump, guys, he tried to drag them and it didn't work. So that's where I look and say there's flaws in the makeup here. They got to change something, and Evan Mobley does have to take that next leap. It goes back to our point last episode of two things can be true at once.
Everybody's got to have an agenda. Everyone's got to have their opinion. I just try not to let it affect any kind of analysis that I have.
Yeah,
and I'm reading some of these quotes now, and I'm laughing because I am a fan of the Valanciunas thing, no matter what route they take to possibly get him. But talking about Valanciunas not being exposed on defense against the Pacers, you think if Valanciunas switches out on the Halliburton, he's not going to get punked? Come on, man. That's going to happen. I don't know where these scenarios come from in these people's minds. Watch the games, guys.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
no.
He is so undervalued. I don't get why Jarrett is so undervalued. I think it's just because of the "what have you done for me lately" stuff, and
for
obviously
sure,
the Knicks series is going to burn into everyone's mind.
His comments after that series have haunted him. I also just think in Cleveland we're all too close to it. He does somebody does one bad thing in Cleveland, we know about it, and we're like, well, this guy sucks. But then how he's that doesn't impact generally how the rest of the league views him. And so that's why I like the trade scenario we talked about with Hachimura and Connect. Like on the surface, yeah, you probably get the concepts of what you're looking for in return, but are you really maximizing the value of the player? And that's, but listen, like you said, everyone has comments on things. It's fun to talk about on the podcast, and we will continue to talk about these things. I'm actually really excited to potentially bring on Yossi and get to pick his brain a little bit on like some of the cap stuff, because I have questions that I don't even have the answers to, and I'm sure we can educate some people on some things too. So we're going to work on that as an off-season episode. You guys know the drill at this point, though. If you've been regular listeners of the show, we encourage you to head on over to Cleveland Cavaliers on SI or si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. Read our written content over there. We always got stuff going. But subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. Cavaliers on SI. The podcast itself, Courtside with the Cavs on SI, which is in video format on that channel, or you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you guys stopping by as always. The conversation rolls on. We'll be back next week with another episode of the pod. We'll see what we have in store for you, but plenty to still talk about with this Cavs team, even as the offseason commences. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for your participation. Thanks for listening as always. Keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers, with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.